What's good, everybody? It's King here. Welcome to another form of tier list involving Far Cry. As I talked about my Far Cry games tier list, I'm going to be doing two other tier lists, in this case involving the antagonists or the antagonistic figures, and at the same time involving protagonists and a protagonist-like figures, as being said. So, like with the case of my other tier list, is obviously my opinion, but at the same time, is going to be set on the criteria of how good these protagonists are for the main characters in comparison, and or their game, their ideas, their substance matter, any case of matter of nuance or fun that you can take from them, and that's pretty much it. In the tiers, we have Cheeks, Mid, Good, Banger, Goat. So starting with Cheeks, starting at the bottom, is the main full core antagonist of Far Cry New Dawn. And a good deal, like the person behind all these different layers of stuff. I feel like he was uninteresting and unimpactful, so I think he's just bully. I think he's shit. I feel like there's nothing from him. I feel like there's no real case of impact or substance really riling up from him or anything to really take from him. The twins are in the same boat. You could arguably switch him out because maybe he has like something more stinging going. But I feel like New Dawn as a game and the fact that it really shouldn't exist, it doesn't really drive anything home to me. The twins don't have anything of grand overarching like nuance or coolness. I think they're cringy in dialogue. I don't think their origin or reasons for why they're so maniacally fucked is really interesting. And I feel no record of actual, uniqueness or coolness from them. I feel like they're all trying to be too overly dramatic, edgy, twisted motherfuckers that don't have anything really ever resolve to them that really makes them be interesting or have something more creditive, overarching, interesting turn of events. What is being said, and I just simply put think that they're just a waste of time to even get interested about. I have no care for them, and there's nothing to come from them at all. So I think their designs are lackluster. Then you have Noir. Now she's not really a villain to me, but she's mainly here because I feel more for her. I think her voice acting, character, what she turns up in the case of the Shanta of Arena, all the fortunate case of, tragedy poured out from her and her unfortunate suicide at the end and being eaten alive by the animals that she, you know, praises and cheers on out into the case of the arena. I feel like it's symbolic, unfortunate downfall for somebody that was forced to become a harborer of monsters, but fully fledged became a self-destroying case of monster, harboring all this type of hate and unneeded bloodlust carrying for shit because she would force people to die, become overzealous and distorted of her reality. And by all accounts, by Pagan Min's own count, she was a good person before, but now she was full forced into the credit of being a disastrous person when you really think about it, because every arena fight always had a big underlying thing from it. And the fact that Pagan Men will be so deframed from any possible good standards they used to have to becoming a overruling monster is the big thing about it. So, I feel more sympathy towards her, as I feel like a lot of what she did was not full definitive of like a whole villain, but I definitely can see the substance matter for her being like a very low, not very good villain, but having some villainous intrigue, to say the least, because at the end of the day, she's mainly a product of the environment she was forced into. Now we have the Far Cry 1 villain. I think he's just the most generic, whatever type of villain. He's a nose twirling villain with some interesting case of possible goals and concept and course, but I don't have any real record of intrigue beyond just the fact that he can just be a simple whatever shooting, opposition. There's no sense of possible sympathy or bare conviction or turns of events. When he goes full freakazoid here, becoming a Frankenstein, I could care less for this nigga, like at all. Then you have Amita, and she's mainline stand as a villain because everything of her, right, is a mixed bag of being a unfortunate shawty that is a product of her environment, being put into things that are very unfortunate and disgusting, and has lived through some very mixed bag, putrid things, but everything that you can receive from her and salvage is a woman that's manipulative, corrupted, overzealous, entitled, and blatantly ignorant and preaching to the choir with no case of actual purpose or any solid formative reason, you know what I'm saying, for why Shawty just basically wants to take territory, grow things for Karat, but doesn't care about the consequences that come with it. She never considers anything, and she's willing to sacrifice a bunch of people and be deliberately bad in almost every case of the way. And yeah, she's just bad as a villain, you know what I'm saying? And her reasonings for this, I can mix bag, try to feel sympathy for her, but when she's blatantly lying and acting like she knows more than what she, gives on, and keeps trying to be a sob bitch to this man AJ. Yeah, I just don't like her. Simple as that. Then you have Batari. Now Batari works for just a crazy mad lady, but she doesn't really have that much more stinging substance matter to me. I think as Zila and what her she is as a concept is fine for Far Cry Primal, but it's not anything too much engaging beyond the case of the fact that the religion, environment, the foes, and her boss fight has some cool creative look and feel to it. She has some sauce, but the sauce kind of just stays mildly tasteful. It doesn't really touch your heart, to say the least. It don't really flick your tongue, to say the least. Then you have Sabal, who I think is, for the most part, the best. I think the fact that he's basically Mohan Gale, aka AG's dad, but a subverting version, and not as, a full craze tyrant on the means of stamping his foot down for the ideals of a mixed bag, very, how should I say this, complicated belief structure, and cracking the code for how to be a simple separation of good and bad by a very childish qualm. He has a very barbaric and very full-fledged hypocritical, contradictory stance of belief of forcing people to confine to the beliefs of religion and tradition and different aspects that's not good, and then out here sacrificing or full-on murking people that sided with Amita for whatever reason without giving them a chance to change, is deliberately dispersing any possible good qualities or purpose as a person. And any of his reasons for this, I feel like, are just whatever flat. And I also credit the fact that he's not a likable person, so you can't fuck with him. How Mohan saw Sabal is how Sabal sees, AJ is. You know what I'm saying? Without even needing to actually say, like, if you actually read about, Mohan and read his journals and all the accounts that he says about Sabal, Sabal is a good pupil to him, but simply is a means to an end. He's a whatever case of soldier that admires him so much and has respect to him because whatever relationship he had with the record of his family. But Sabal sees this man AJ in the same sense, a war machine that he can use for his own means. And that's fine. Again, when I put some of these people in cheeks, except for like these lower people, they're not so bad that I can't see a villainous touch. It's just they're so flat within their means. Sabal never gets killed full-fledged canonly, and there's a mixed bag of the fact that like this motherfucker is just bad to be bad, and his whole thing for child marriage, obviously I feel like that's disgusting. His whole purpose for putting up some different religious take of this and total matter of this is bad, but he has a better side because at least everything he's doing is preserving and uplifting, even if he's gonna do it in a whole drown of blood activity. So even though he's dispersed with a lot of good credit of takes and belief, I can understand his side of being a villain more or less. So that's why he gets to stay in Cheeks tier. Now, to mid, we have Depla or Paul. Now, Paul's only here because I can feel a little bit more substance matter of like character care for him. I feel like he's the most, underwhelming, undervalued villain because, first of all, we don't even get to see him that much. I think his Palace, aka Fort, is an interesting, bigger, harder upper for the case of Far Cry. I think the pure fact that this motherfucker, as a person, has some interesting, disgusting parts to him, with him being a maniac, a butcher, and his only value is money and pulling the greatest means for his family. But I feel like I can never really be in touch with him too much about his family because he has no super redeeming qualities except for the fact that he's kind of funny, he is a decent voice actor, crack of also the fact that, his relationship with Pegaman and other aspects of him are interesting. The theories that, he could have used to work, for Hoyt over here, big head ass nigga, and pull some different aspects of potentially some sporadic crackhead talk in the back of a car with this man, AJ, where you had him in a trunk kidnapping him and taking him back to the, golden path, and then his eventual fate where he's locked up in a cage on top of a hill. Just some other records of this disturbing fact that he's done so much of the most terrible, vile things to people, all in the name of forming bigger money bonds and pretty much evolving the people through slavery, black market deals, rape, possible cases of child labor, just almost like fucked ideals. And he feels no regret about that because money is the only thing that's going to sully that possible pain. I think it's a mixed credit of intriguing, but it's not so enamoring or substance matter feeling to me that obviously would change him. I can understand if you think the Paul is in the same tier, but unlike Sabal, where all values for what he's doing is a very simple creditive thing, you have someone like him who reminds me of Hickey from Assassin's Creed 3, where the values of him is very so grounded and simple that kind of crinkles a little bit of a dark peek into the mind of a person, where you realize that all of this disgusting, sour fuck shit that he does is all coming from a place of simple enamoredness about money and family, and all the bad things that come in growth of it is all by the hand of him, but it's all by the calling of his boss. He does what he does because it's the way of his life. And he, even though not being a product of his environment, lives so much by this code that any devastation, any disbursement of possible good bonds and essence is simply a part of the foundation of the money system that he makes. He also reminds me of, even though I don't like the movie, the Mortal Kombat 2021 live action movie had a line from Cabal that I think is a mixed bag, understandable, where it's like, what we do is terrible. Treachery, dishonest, is dehumanizing. But the thing is, we can sling in and out and still keep some essence of our stuff. But the only way we do that is if we keep doubling up the chances. It's a addictive system, but it's a system that has created a lifestyle for us where we can live our full-fledged dreams. No more having to be bound to a penny picture, pitiful lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be living to, the biggest detriment to your life and downgrade of your self-esteem, downgrade of your soul. You can live to your fullest expectations. Even if you do fucked, that fuck is only so little where in comparison to the full flavor of the lifestyle that you picked. So in this case, the plural reminds me of someone like him, where he will devour the juices of life and not care whatever consequences come with that in the full garden field that is life. And that is fine to him because he can always sully the chances for that to come back to him because he has so many juices to take from that he can gargantuanly fulfill himself with life to a point where he can stave off whatever comes. But in turn, that does not happen. So I understand how that might, sound like a overthinking matter on his character, but I just think that is interesting to think about with all other cracks of, his character. Now, next tier is literally just all the villains except for Castillo over here in one package. I think they're all similar. I think they all represent something super interesting, from greed, wanting to make the better prosperous means for your people in truth, but you do it through very callous and undermining means. You live privilegedly, you see things privilegedly, but you try to have a heart in the deep end, but that keeps getting sullied by the man that holds the biggest sense of power. In the case of Castillo's baby mama, a rich playboy that plays the game because that's the only way to really live. You got to play the game by fuck rules, because if you don't, you'll get schooled. And simply put, I just think they're all different representations of unfortunate social commentary and, fucked up ordeals, or even a woman trying to live to the greatest heights of, her traditional family, but is undermined because of her either being a woman or in a stance of her being a coward and trying to do more. I think it's kind of funny. And then the Count of Castillo's nephew, who is just a bum bitch nigga, a lamb, and a freak, a whole weird vato. I think they all are similar in the fact that they're all pretty simple. They're mid as they are, but they all pick a different sense of, uniqueness or nuance in terms of events, especially what they do for Yara as a map. And so, with that being said, that is why I think they all deserve to be here. Now, I Ul's above them is because I think Ul has a lot more unique creative case of reason for why he's a villain. First of all, I like his boss fight for the most part. I think Ul's design is very cool, stellar, and interesting. The foundation of his people, them being Neanderthals or ancient group people that are not in the same scope of original to general humans in the case of their brain function or looks or any other case of something like that. These motherfuckers are the biggest Brocs on the planet. You know what I'm saying? They're cannibals, demonic, full barbaric beast in human skin. But the values for why they are all this deranged, scuffing new creation of crash out activity is simply because of motherfuckers in this time being, through the most unfortunate circumstances, and these circumstances come with this. Now, when I said that was because of the fact that obviously, with the origin for why comes with a different thing, but when I say the case of, it's because of this, or plus a whole, new means, is simply because, like I said, they've been for unfortunate stuff, but when I say pus, I mean that is because, again, pus of, the most unfortunate shit in their lives had now drained them of good functionality of mind or environmental knowledge. And so with that being said, they went about doing the most horrendous fuck shit imaginable. Eating, obviously, their own kind in truth, rape, pillage, slaughtering, dang near genocide to one nation and trying to take their territory, and doing that also possibly to another. And we don't know who started technically the whole war first, but by all accounts, the Udam did spark this war. But Tardi and Azila want to do it for religious, obviously as well, disastrous purposes. You know what I'm saying? These motherfuckers Aztecing people. But I think that's interesting. So when I say that, I don't mean it's like pause. Obviously, I mean because, pause of all that shit kept building up in their lives. So eventually, it went to the point where they became feral and out of pocket. And Ul's main core reason for it is explaining why it was dying was simply because of the fact that Winja and their people outside their territory up in the north in the winter of Central Europe, or Oros, they saw that they were living good, and so because they were running low on all these other things and they were growing sick because of the harsh environment and mixed argument, sexual transmitted disease, cancer, having fucking hemorrhoids mentally. I don't fucking know what they got, but they got a multi-plethora of problems that have nothing to do with other people. It's more the culture problem, no offense. That right there made him believe that was the way to go. But the fact that he was a menace, I feel like he's had a better record of performance feel with his essence, his design, boss fight, voice actor, all that shit makes it interesting. So again, because of that, plus of all this other shit, like I said, plus and plus of that bad, that's the reason why I feel like it's all around, interesting, to say the least, which is a little bit more unique than these people, because I just feel like there's so much wackiness in his field that makes him a little bit more interesting to me than both of these people. But still. But don't get me wrong, the thing is with this tier list is that you can interchange any of these people. I just think, that's something, unique and cool to me. Now, Yuma's here for a plethora of reasons. I think her boss fight, disguised as Kai Lang, has some intrigue, to say the least, but it's not the most cool and gravitasing. I think her voice actress, her way of mind tripping people, her legend status, her fortress, confined with the fact of like, her headspace for a second and going through all these different cracks and turns and a delusional mind trip and getting a taste for why she does what she does and why she believes what she believes is kind of interesting. But she was so, undervalued because she has so much potential to be a more interesting and tie with more gravitas antagonist. And I just feel like she did not work wonders. I feel like Yuma was just like whatever, and anything about her didn't really add much more. But the reason why she's better than these people to me, just a little bit, is the fact because of everything I just said with how she moves and her talks and why she does what she does is simply because she wants to paint a better image for her lover in the case of pagan men, and at the same time find a way to reinvent the people through the harsh means that she saw grow her people out the mud. So, in a mixed bag sense, I think that's a little bit more considerably intriguing and sound more like a true enamoring threat because you see that she's just a delirious woman as a product of mix her environment, but also record of being someone that does everything she does because of full love sick, because she's obsessed with pagan men, and arguably what she'll try to do to this man Jason with mixed bag, sexual assault, torture, and a bunch of more disgusting things kind of put her more in an upper hand of wild to me than any of these three right here, right? In technical sense, or all these people, because in technical sense, you have like 6 villains right here. But yeah. Next is Buck in this picture in Far Cry 3. He's here because of his voice acting, the multiple times you talk with him, the lore, expedition parts of him, his greater founding of like, disgusting, depraved activity, you know what I'm saying, is interesting to think about because of how absurdly disgusting and foul the black market system that makes Hoyt, Vaz, and a lot of other characters rich keep tying back to someone like him that will treat people like muck if it's for their pleasure. Buck is a very degenerate, weird fuck nigga, but he's so funny for the wrong reasons and is such a delirious, interesting character, coming with his technical boss fight being kind of cool. Foundation, the fact that he's kind of an interesting parody comparison to Jason, where he could go deliriously off the walls and spiral into a habit of the most insane, full-fledged putulate ideals, because in this case his ideal is that because he has power, he's accompanied with the capability to manipulate, he soils himself in the greatest pool of money, wealth, reputation. This man can downform people's life to whatever he feels, and Jason pretty much can live by that considerable value because the more and more he kills, the more and more power he gains, the more tattoos he obtains, the more obtaining of life in the palm of his hand he could pretty much fulfill, because in this case the more people he kills, the more life he gains, aka protecting people. But the more and more he kills, the more a sense of power can be stringed. So in this case, the more people that Buck buys, obtains property over, money pool, or any possible absurd things like that to want to fiend for like he does, because this nigga literally raped Keith, disgusting Carvel nigga, that literally can formulate a interesting parody opposite where he's another batch of Jason Brody's possible descent into darkness and hellscape, because he's the fullest representation of that. When you let these absurd cravings of power and obscenities let you turn into a sick piece of shit like Buck. I mean, this is just a foul nigga. I mean, he got his hand on this junk. This is a weird nigga. This is a sick Negro, face up. But yeah, that's Buck, and that's the reason why he's better than all these people, because obviously all that. Then you got Joseph Seed's second older brother, correct me if I'm wrong, was being said. And he's here just because I think his personality is interesting. I think he's like Buck, but more Hollywood scandalous person. I think his boss fight and other cracks of his character are interesting. I think how he paves the way for things. are very interesting in full, and all around I think just he's just a cool upper of Buck. I know you can maybe say Buck is a little bit better because I hate parodies, but I think this Hollywood trying to be the boss, but really is a mock of a boss activity, dude, because he's a pussy and he's a fake, he's a fraud in almost every aspect of the way. I think he's interesting, but I also think he gets a little bit sick more because of his voice actor and things like that, and arguably design. But then you have the case of Joseph's adopted little sister. I think she's interesting because of her origin, how she came to be what she is. I think she's interesting and very enticing with her boss fight and her whole purpose, and the fact that she's really just a victim and twisted case of depressed lady that goes into all this porridge of fake happiness and fake belief, and now has been dissolved of any means of who she is, and makes her go crazy, and you unfortunately have to kill her. And yeah, I mean, she's just more sympathetic. Like Noir, she's arguably not a villain, but the reason why she's better than all these people is because I feel the most bad for her, and I think she's the most interesting out of all of them entirely for the most part. But I can understand why you would see another person being higher or lower than the person in comparison. It's also isn't obvious that because obviously I have not played the games all over again that involve these people, I could change my mind, and like with the games, I will make a new tier list or video to represent this, because obviously that's by community post or something else. But yeah, next we have Castillo. Now, I know some people think Castillo is the worst Far Cry villain, the most undergrading of, Far Cry villain. I got people in the background, so that's why, it's so loud, no offense, what is being said. But yeah, what is being said, Castillo, hold on, I got you. Castillo, right, I understand, is a villain that did not really live up to all the expectations of people, and I do agree. But I think with Carlos Besito's voice acting, the plus one capabilities of gravitation, intrigue, the fact that if you read about him, he's literally a man projecting all of his unfortunate upbringing as a default lang for shit. He's a guy hungry for power and obsessed with it, and he's to be fueled by power or he's nothing. He's a power freak, he's a control freak, and he has nothing to obtain more except for power, because there's nothing more to him than power. He literally lives for power and nothing else. And all the talks that he has, even if he is a hypocrite, deliberate fake, and phony, the fact that he only does everything he does to have the ultimate security for himself because he's dying, and his son, and every aspect of his character is a real representation of tyranny, dictatorship, and blasphemous political ideals and form, is interesting to me. Because out of all these people, I feel like he's the most real representation of that shit. Even though, obviously, because they're not real, it's not bad. But I think he's a real representation of depressingly, why people that do the most dark, unfortunate, depraved shit, or go down roads of the most gargantuan levels of damn activity and darkness that course down into the most whirlwind of sins, is that. Even though arguably all these people have those ground chase of reasons, and obviously his villains, compadre, and his whole family is coming into one, I think he creates an interesting parody with not just Danny and credit of everybody that he's lived through all the fuck shit, but he's went down into the dumps because of it. He took that shit, and that never could be a way to fuel him to be better. That was the full spiral, the full like nail that broke the camel's back, cringe for him to become the monster that he always feared would take over his family, aka being a person trying to drown his people in suffering, when he drowned them in suffering to gain a sense of accomplishment. And I think that is a good representation of a villain, and I think he actually does work, and I do actually think that Castillo is better than all these people. I know that might sound like, a hot take, but again, he's not the most peak villain, but I think saying he's garbage or he's the worst villain, I don't know, man. I don't really think that. I think he's worse only because of the fact that he does not interact with the protagonist as much, and or there's not that much substance beyond just he yap a lot, and a lot of his shit you either have to read or you have to pay attention really to everything that he says and all of his statements to really make him work. He's kind of a talk, don't show villain, and I think that is actually a problem. But you could actually say the same thing for like all of these people. Like these niggas are literally absent for half of the shit, and it's only in two core purposes are they shown. But the final villain in mid is the Jackal, aka is the Far Cry 1 protagonist as an antagonist. Now, I'm not going to rate him as a protagonist for this because obviously he is a protagonist. I'm just rating his villain stuff. If I was rating him as a full character, I'll put him in good. But as a villain, I think he's fine. I think he's just mid. I think he's in the middle. It's simply because of the fact that this man's purpose is playing both sides of a civil war in Africa to eventually eliminate both bad, corrupt sides on both, and he plays the biggest gray foundation of doing dubious morale shit to play the game of right versus wrong, but he does a lot of wrong to try to appreciate right in it, aka trying to push for right. And I think he's just a very interesting ground of villain. I think his voice acting, his comparison to the protagonist, who's a mercenary that is sent to do something good for people, but is on devotion to killing so many to get to a guy that's really only killing a few bad and a few good to make absolute right. Because you cannot play one or the other side because neither side is good. So you're in a conflict where everything's great and mixed turmoil. Everyone else here, you have reasonable qualm to want to kill them or you're sympathetic to them. This guy I feel like is always going to be a mixed bag. Okay, I understand you, and I can't really say that you're wrong because they're both mercenaries. You're both bad people, or you're both morally ambiguous people. You both kill people for money. You both do things to sabotage the living of another to gain something, right? And so that's why he's going to be the most interesting. I mean, I think you could arguably buff him up to good. I just feel like, the three villains I have here are more good because of multiple reasons. Now, Hoyt is here for a multitude of reasons. The symbolic parody to Jason Brody, right, is so interesting. What he did to Vaz and his grooming, like Citra, but on like a whole, you know, little bit of a decrease sense into full insanity, but also harbored a lot of the main stake reasons for it. Because I'm gonna get to Citra, because Citra being second greatest villain might seem like a surprise to y'all, but I really do have some reasons for why. But with this being said, Hoyt again groomed this man Vaz to absurd occasions like Citra, but again on like a more negligent sense to full drill in fuck shit. But he's the main stake reason for Vaz being a puppet. He treats him terribly. He's deserted of any compassion, any humanity. He's a freak when it comes down to money and obsession. He's a gambler, a manipulator, a kingpin for the most strong form market of the black market. He's a terrible person, odious, is delirious and a maniac, but every sentiment for his values and cause is to grow the greatest fulsome of money so that he no longer has to work for the way he did. He's had to work like his father to grow what he's done. He's been on the grind, and at the end of the day, he's just a working man, but in a terrible sense. He has a funny personality and commendable aspects, but you can tell that he's a man that lives off of fear, lives off of grittiness. He lives off the despair of others. He has no care for anybody. He doesn't give a fuck about Jason, his family, Vaz, Citra. He has no care. It's all just whatever case the thing. As long as money's flowing in his pocket, that's all that matters. And he lives by the same code that any corrupt capitalist person would live by, is that money over emotion, morals, and purpose in life is the only way to gain any of those things. And he has none of them. Truly. He has no enough money to make him be truly great, and obviously he's dead, so that's why I say technically he doesn't have that, because he might be close to being the richest Far Cry villain, to be fair. But yeah, that's why Hoyt is there. I like his boss fight. I like a lot of aspects about him, and I do like his militia, and the theory that Deplore or some other people were a part of his militia is interesting. It just shows the connect that he has, because he's so intriguingly connected in almost every case of regard. But you have Pagan Min here because of his, origin, why he does what he does, his voice actor, his values, the unfortunate heartbreak and disastrous shit that followed with his, baby girl's death the leaving of his wifey, leaving of his technical second son in AJ, and just a clusterfuck of problems made him course into the most deranged spiral of control, need to pin his foot down on even reasonable oppositions in the Golden Path who are terrorists in the greater bunch, and formulate better formation of security to make a world where he feels accomplished in life, as I talked about in the case for my, Pagan Men Control basic review and my Far Cry tier list, shameless plug. That right there makes him so interesting and enamored to me. But the main problem I have is that a lot of this stuff isn't greater explored to the most defined sense, and a lot of things about Pagan Men that are a little more interesting are not full configured and stained, even though he has a great boatload of things about him that make him defined. And I do love that at the core, he really did everything he did to make his family for himself, make peace, but his peace was simply dissolved and divulged to the point of a wild control fantasy insanity where every possible means of purpose for him is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting shit to change back to what it was when he lives in the past and he uses his daughter's excuse to do everything he wants to. That right there makes him spectacular as a villain, which might make him go over Joseph Seed's oldest brother, who I don't know the name of, I forgot his name, but White Doomfist is basically what I call him because he has similar ideas to him. I think it's interestingly more of the same, but on the fact that he felt nostalgia from war. He didn't feel like anything was going really good in life without war. And when he came back from war, as you know, he's a veteran. He's a OG of the guns and all rack of all trades Punisher activity. He felt like putting down motherfuckers was the only solace in life. And when Joseph C. came out with his crackhead plan and wanted to full Homelander regime the entire county, he went full splurge crazy with it. And he went about the whole means to solidize, the entire county off of the backs of a regime cult and went full warmonger code with it, and he felt like this is the only way to grow true strength. War is needed so that people can evolve and push into things, and he's a badass. I love his voice actor. I love what he does in comparison to the deputy, where he's a parody of all the badass symptoms and purposes of him, but like with Joseph Seed, as I'll explain more, pretty much stands off of the whole religious pave of the fact that you can say you're better than me, you can say you know more than me, but like any person in the Bible or any person in history needing to do good, you need to get your hands dirty. And you killed so many people to get to me and favored that more than coming after me in ways that were what your namesake would give. You crammed foot for everything. And there was no care. It's only until you get put in a situation to pull unfortunate splurge of bloodlust shit that you understand why what you do is just as quote unquote bad or gray as him. As he put him in a bloodlust frenzy and he killed a bunch of people who didn't deserve it, but there was no difference on his face. Just like how he killed so many people that deserved it and did it, and there was no difference. Because in truth, violence is just a part of who we are naturally. And in the words of Sundowner, everybody is by nature. They just grow out of it when they grow older. Start knowing right from wrong. That's immoral. Bullshit. War is just a part of who we are. Why fight it? It's pretty much his whole grand cuss means for why he coursed into all these booming wild extents of war tyranny, pretty much. But yeah, that's just a little bit more interesting to me because he's devalued all like aspects of a respectable soldier and just pretty much is a serial killer disguised as a man trying to preach to the choir about shit. He uses his quote unquote military trauma and experience as a value for why, he does what he does. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, banger, we have Joseph Seed as the third best Far Cry villain. Now, he's the third, and I've explained, why, kind of, and again, shameless plug, my Far Cry games tier list. But I think, simply put, he's the best because his purpose and his belief was technically right, but it's so deranged deliberately callous and unforsakenly full madness beyond compare. Like it's unforsaken dispute of crazed madness, blatant, manipulative, narcissistic, and psychopathic, arguably, behavior, but it pledges to the faith of seeing something so unbelievable and crafting ways to do it, but it was played in a way where his entire vision of doomsday came out of luck, and same time his perseverance and purpose for things is off the collapse of his entire mental status. Killing your own daughter to find a purpose in life is fuck. Sacrificing, killing, robbing, pillaging, allowing multi-case of dang near war crimes to cultivate a better higher calling is so fucked. But because of his charisma, the unfortunate unravel and correspondence to that, and the fact that all his ideals are perpetuated off of the back of singing to something of higher status, but it will just never come the way that you will see it. And in some way, unironically, he's right. And he parodies the deputy who came here off the back of justice, and he does what he does off of calling of justice, and they both have become way opposites from whatever they stood for, and in some way they both became one to one. They became symbolically a parody of each other. He parodies the ideal of freedom cry for whatever grotesque, putrid, and straight up blasphemous means. He is sin stroking in every case of the way, but he paints himself like Jesus. When a rookie prays for justice, places their foot down for good, and stands on business against evil, but will kill so many, divulge from the code that they stood for and the morals that they preached by interactions, just to fully get vengeance and kill him when everything he's been doing was to rid the world of unfortunate sin. But you're trying to kill him to rid his sins, when how much sinful can you be to try to proclaim to be better than me? Basically, in a very fucked up, kind of stupid way, but mixed understandable way, sending a message that no matter the goals that a person has in the name of justice or righteousness, there will never be a place in the circle of life where you are undoubtedly the good guy. Because there is no such thing as good in life. It is only the righteous path. And that righteous path is based off a path of ruthlessness. As every good person to proclaim as this has always had to be competitive, has always had to be ruthless, has always had to be a whole sin of anarchy, and pave the way off of the backs of cataclysmic stitch of like goals. But I've cultivated a mindset and legacy that represents them in great unfoul means and unflawed and uncongruent, where everybody's ruled by the foundation of killed or be killed, conquerors over the conquered, things like that. Like his brother, the trauma, like his other older brother, it's the false belief, and like his little sister is going in so much delirious, distorted mental that has fueled him to do the most fucked, unfortunate creation of slaughter and bastardy like no other. But he always believed what he believed. And so with that being said, it kind of makes you think. There's so many bad people in this world that have ruled what they believe to be right. And in this case, he was technically right. It's just how he did it was flawed and deliberately evil. So that makes him such a more complex and creative villain to me, where every aspect of what he is the same extent that any other man in history or other situations has went for. So to me, even if you think he's a bad villain, as he's villainous and he's cathartic, it makes sense why he would see things the way he sees through his purpose and his lessons and how much creation of bad he has done. Now, for the second best villain is Citra. Citra is the reason for a lot of bullshit. Alright, first of all, Citra is a freak hoe, a blatant, disgusting creative shawty who's a vile, manipulative harlot who will deprave a person's mind of every good instinct. She has mentally, physically, sexually, and spiritually abused her little brother Vaz, have turned him into a monster and degraded him of all his good spirit, has cultivated the bad and absurd things for the case of multiple actions to gain the ultimate warrior and founded the stand for this type of calling for the ultimate champion of our people. And then when Jason Brody came, the outsider, the naive, ignorant, unknown person who she found likeness through simple sexual attraction, because there's nothing about Jason besides his will to kill and full Jason Bod blatant blazing on the track of death in sight activity shit, because Jason solely evades his mind with the idea of killing equals power, sex equals security, and through countless case of bodies and tatau gaining more tattoos as the days go by, he can calmly preserve himself in excellence, because that is the only way to fulfill something in his life. He finally found something that he was good at and can stay persistent on and never be pulled back from. To live fully out in demon time extent and never feel pulled back from life. And Citra full force throttled that into his mind. She spearheaded him in mental state that the best way to be a warrior was through the calling of death. Every person around you deserves to die. Her feeding him this knowledge in the most crazed sense, feeding him a whole fucking pride children's story of the creation of her people and their island to the greatest fullest, dragging him through the dirt and mud of extreme pools of violence, killing her older, ideals about the idea of wanting to free her people and liberate things, and just off the back of killing to kill, dispersing all sense of possible emotional attachment to this man when time comes for the second ending. And the fact that she has no remorse in Va's death, she cares for nothing. She would do disastrous shit. She would order her people to kill an innocent man, have this woman set her lovers, friends to be killed, kill his little brother, kill his ex-girlfriend, kill everyone he cares about, disperse all care for him, and show nothing but manipulative, disgusting, depraved means for the fullest sense of gaining the ultimate symbolicness of whatever her prideful stand is for a champion of absurdity. And what she does is not out of love for him, but because he will fulfill whatever destiny, cherishment she holds. And when she kills him, it represents a symbolic stamp of the fact that what she did was only to garner a sense of crazy obtainment of power. Because for killing him, the ultimate warrior, and taking his seed, she would reinvent her people for a greater power stand, because now she holds the ultimate warrior in her stomach, and she doesn't have to worry about needing to use another man or person to breathe that out, right? At the same time, she doing that to Vaz and possibly almost doing that to Dennis, who's now corrupted to the greatest fullest, as that man is a dubious fuck nigga simp, a fucking airhead, right? This woman now sealed the deal of being the status quo's greatest trophy, because everyone does what she does for the simple cause of obtaining her love. Like, she's basically a succubus. This woman is leaking poison, deceit, a plague to life. I mean, Shorty is just a straight demon, bro. I'm telling you, Shorty is not a good person. So when she did what she did, that was the only reason why. So, in this sense, that is why she's of the highest hold of villainy and love. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, because the voice actress does her perfectly. Citra, with all the things I've said, is beautiful. You know what I'm saying? She bad. And if it wasn't for her, Vaz would not have been led to Hoyt, course into greater delirious, disgusting activities, and full-fledged become a unseeable man and only seen as the disastrous pour of violence, disgrace, and arguably like crazy obsession with trying to fulfill the answer of insanity in action, but crakes into more of that obsessive insanity spiral that someone like Jason is. Jason killed for the first time self-defense and poured more down into violence, obsession, and disgraceful, disbursement of all actual ideals and integrity that could be seen as, very noble and credible. But Vaz here, right, being the GOAT, the greatest of the Far Cry villains, one of the greatest video game villains of all time, absolute G, from the voice acting, character, purpose, is simply the GOAT because unlike anyone else, he can acknowledge in full his insanity, call it out, and be content. And he's the only Far Cry villain to leave on a good notice. He's the only Far Cry villain to have all these people, not to live after what he's done, but to live what after he's done and feel content with it because he has peace knowing that he no longer can be mentally tortured and bound to the unfortunate, horrific acts of what he has had to live with, do, and deal with. He's no longer a pawn of his sister, no longer a lapdog to Hoyt, and no longer fueling the fires of burden and vengeance that Jason Brody scours the islands for. He no longer has to be a scourge of insanity. He can now live with the philosophy that he's done what he's done and he can try to value something more without it. And at the end of the day, he's a victim. All them scars come from Citra or Hoyt. All his bad and damaged mind comes from that. And you can tell in his voice and his look that this is a boy born through tragedy and travesties. And that is why he's the GOAT. Vaz Montenegro, the goddamn GOAT. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? It's that simple, man. But yeah, that's Vaz. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching this long, possibly ass video. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Peace out, mommy. Love y'all.